Shalom to everyone. Good morning to our West Coast participants and good afternoon to our East Coast participants. My name is Dina Waktel, and on behalf of myself and my co-hosts, Ayala and David, and all our colleagues here at Canadian Friends of Hebrew University, it is our pleasure to welcome you to this presentation, A Taste of the Mediterranean with culinary lifestyle expert, Tori Avey. If you have not eaten breakfast or lunch yet, this program will definitely make you want to sit down for a delicious meal. Tori has generously offered to donate 50% of any new membership fees to her blog made through this webinar or through our website towards supporting scholarships at the Robert H. Smith Faculty of Agriculture, Food and Environment at the Hebrew University, where students are working to develop new sustainable food sources. I want to take the opportunity while I have your attention to let you know about our next week program at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so 1 hour earlier than today. We will be holding a webinar about advancing women in leadership, promoting gender equality, and creating agents of change. You know the saying, you educate a woman, you educate a generation. And that program will feature Professor Muna Hui Kasabri, Dean of the School of Social Work at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and Dr. Aizeldin Abulesh, Associate Professor at the Dalai Lama School of Public Health at the University of Toronto and the founder of the Daughters for Life Foundation. The discussion will be moderated by author and journalist Randy Drubin. Now back to today's program. If you have any questions during the webinar, please submit them via the Q&A box, and toward the latter part of the program, our moderator will address these questions from the audience. It is now my pleasure to introduce Ambassador Ido Aharoni, who will introduce our speaker and lead the conversation with Tori Avey. Ido Aharoni serves as Global Distinguished Professor for International Relations at NYU. He is a 25-year veteran of Israel's Foreign Service, founder of the Brand Israel program, and has been Israel's longest serving consul general in New York and the tri-state area. Ido, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Dina, and thank you all for participating in this very, very unique and special webinar, and it's very special for me on a personal level because I get to interview someone that I consider a very close friend. Tori and her husband Shuki Levy are very, very close friends, and I've known them for many, many years. So Tori has this tremendous website, and I know I don't have to spend any time on introducing her, but her bio is so impressive that I would like to take a moment of your time just to give you some highlights. So Tori Avey is a screenwriter, producer, and the creator of the popular cooking and lifestyle blog, ToriAvey.com. We will be talking about ToriAvey.com today and the various programming that ToriAvey.com is offering. In 2010, Tori decided to turn her hobby of cooking into a blog, exploring the history of every dish she cooked. That blog, ToriAvey.com, is now the #1 website devoted to food history, Mediterranean and Middle Eastern cuisine, reaching many millions of readers per year. Tori's cooking blog was named the IACP People's Choice Award winner for Best Culinary Website. She also serves on the International Executive Committee of the Genius 100 Visions, which is an active and engaged curated community inspired by the life and work of Albert Einstein. The organization brings together exceptionally imaginative, accomplished, and compassionate minds to reimagine the future, including luminaries such as RBG, Deepak Chopra, Frank Gehry, Ridley Scott, and Barbara Streisand, Michael Bloomberg, and many, many others. I should also mention that her husband, Shuki Levy, a world famous composer, is also one of the visionaries. Tori's food writing, recipes, and photography have appeared in several major publications, including PBS, Parade, Bon Appetit, and Williams Sonoma. There's a very, very long list of credits here. She has many, many fans in the world of mainstream media, in blog sphere, and of course in real life. And you'll be surprised, not all of her fans are people from the Mediterranean or from the Middle East. In fact, she has millions and millions of followers from all over the world. So, welcome, Tori Avey. Such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here and nice to see your face.
Yes, yes, and I know it's early for you, and we appreciate that. I have, I was born in 1962 in Israel. Food wasn't a big deal. Food was something very utilitarian, right? You had schnitzel, mashed potatoes, some vegetables, and that was it. And no one was really talking about food. And so tell us about your what led you to develop this keen interest in food, and tell us a little bit about your personal background. I understand you're from California originally.
Yes, I am born and raised in California, and my family is from California. And so, I was really raised on pretty typical American food, although I did have an influence from the Mediterranean pretty early on from my grandparents. My grandparents spent the 70s traveling through the Mediterranean in a VW bus, one of those camper buses, and it had a little, kitchenette with a little kerosene stove inside. So they would camp from castles to ruins, and so they brought back with them these flavors that I was introduced to pretty early on. So, most kids who grew up in California of my generation had no idea what couscous was, but I was able to taste that pretty early on through my grandparents. But, when I went to college, it was normal, basic American fare. And for a long time, it was back to just normal food, American style food. And then I met the man who would become my husband. And I would say that the whole inspiration for the blog and the website really started with a skillet of shakshuka that he cooked me. I had never tasted shakshuka before. And it was a bit of a revelation for somebody who, I had had exposure to Mediterranean flavors, but Middle Eastern was very new to me in terms of, Israeli type cooking. And my husband is half Ashkenazi, half Sephardic. So he had these two influences in his food culture and his family. So I started getting very curious about these flavor profiles that I didn't know much about. And I started talking a lot with family and friends who all had their own food stories. And it got me wanting to explore it a little deeper. And I've always been a history buff since the time I was pretty young. My grandpa actually was the one who got me into history at a very young age. And so I started wondering about the history of these different recipes and ingredients. And, particularly when it comes to Jewish food, every recipe has a story. Every recipe has a background, and it can take you pretty far back in terms of the diaspora and where these different flavors come from. So it's very fascinating. So when I was exploring these, I thought, let me put this on a little website online, because we would often have friends and family who would come over for dinner, and they would be like, can I have your recipe? And I would say, sure. And I thought it would be easier if I just put this on a little website so I can just, share it with our friends. And so I blogged about shakshuka, and I feel like I may have been one of the first people to blog about shakshuka. Now there are thousands of shakshuka recipes online, but in the beginning, there really wasn't much going on with Israeli food, Middle Eastern cuisine when I started the blog in 2010. So fast forward, here we are, and tens of millions of people are reading the site, and it's just exploded in a way that I never could have anticipated, but I'm really gratified by. I'm just really, I love food, and I love history, and I love culture, and those things kind of came together in this incredible way on this website.
So you're right about food history, and you're fascinated by Mediterranean food, Middle Eastern food. But when it comes to cooking yourself, what kind of recipes do you like to cook?
Well, you're asking me this, but I've cooked for you many times, so you know a few things I like to cook. I gravitate more towards Middle Eastern and Mediterranean, and that's simply because we've done a lot of travel in this part of the world. Every year we're in Israel at least 2 or 3 times. I mean, obviously things have changed recently just because of the global situation, but in the past, we were there a lot. And we also do a lot of travel in the Mediterranean. I'm really drawn to this part of the world because of my grandparents' travel there, our family history there, and just I find all of those flavors very fascinating. When you talk about the Mediterranean, there's a lot of interconnectedness with the flavors. And the history is very deep in this part of the world. And these countries do intersect and interconnect in really fascinating ways, and the cuisine as well. So I'm really drawn more towards this part of the world and the flavors, although I do like to cook all kinds of things. I'm not limited, but I do enjoy Mediterranean and Middle Eastern the most. And Yemenites.
Yemenite food. I know. I love Yemenite food. So we tell us about the experience awaiting for us when we visit toriavey.com. Tell us a little bit about the structure of the website. What kind of experiences should we anticipate?
So toriavey.com, I really built it in a way to be very explanatory for anybody who is, even somebody who's brand new to cooking. If you've ever tried one of my recipes, or when somebody tries it for the first time, they'll see that I'm very, very specific with ingredients, amounts, and I break things down in a very clear way with photos or with video. Most of the recipes on the site have video now, just because I was new to this once. I've been cooking since I was a kid, but the real education came when I was much older. And so I wanted people who didn't have any experience cooking to have good results with these recipes. And so every recipe you see a lot of clarity about how it's broken down. And of course, a tidbit of history on where these came from, whether it's the recipe or an ingredient in the recipe, because that's always fascinating to me that every dish has a story to tell.
Now, you recently launched Tori's Mediterranean Table, right? It's a new membership program, and I know that we have a little video to share. Can you tell us a little bit more about this membership program, where the idea came from, and what is it?
Absolutely. So I mentioned in the beginning a little bit about my grandparents and their travels through the Mediterranean. So I've been wanting for a long time to put together a collection of recipes that I have gathered from the Mediterranean, the Middle East, and basically all these countries bordering the Mediterranean Sea. When people think of the Mediterranean in America, typically think of Italy, France, Greece. They don't necessarily think of the Middle Eastern side, but this is a sea that unites all of these incredible countries and cultures. And so I thought, wouldn't it be fun to create a collection of recipes inspired by this part of the world? And originally my idea was to write it as a cookbook, and I'd been working on it for a while. And then the COVID crisis hit, and suddenly we were stuck at home. And we couldn't travel, and as somebody who loves to travel, that was tough. I miss it. I miss being in these parts of the world, and so I knew I wasn't the only one who was missing this. And I thought, what? Maybe there's something more we can do with this to bring people together who love travel, who love culture, who love this food from this part of the world, and to really give them an interactive visual experience. So talking about different regions of the Mediterranean, different countries, what is the culture, and really getting a visual sense of what these places are, in addition to cooking through the recipes and making that a more interactive experience that people can do in their own kitchens at home while they're stuck at home. So that's kind of where the idea started. I think if you want to maybe show the intro video, it will give people a little bit more of an idea of what it is.
Hi, I'm Tori Avey. Welcome to my Mediterranean Table.
In my new membership program, you'll join an amazing community of food lovers, people who like to travel and learn and taste together. With Tori's Mediterranean Table, you'll journey to exciting, far-off destinations without ever leaving your home. We'll learn the history, get a taste of the culinary culture, and cook together as we explore the incredible flavors in this part of the world. From the olive groves of Tuscany to the gorgeous islands of Greece, the ancient ports of Israel to the majestic shores of Morocco, we'll savor authentic flavors from far-off destinations and soak in a uniquely Mediterranean culinary experience. First and foremost, this is a community where we all come together to prepare, taste, and share our culinary creations. We'll be cooking some really incredible meals, connecting through food, and making memories together to last a lifetime.
Very nice. Now you put together a team of experts around this initiative. Tell us a little bit about the experts and why you needed them and who they are.
Well, when this turned into more of a visual exploration of the countries versus just my take on, Mediterranean cuisine, I thought it can't just be my voice. We really have to engage people who are experts in their field, in the communities that we're exploring. I really wanted this to be authentic. I wanted these flavors to resonate and be true to the original cuisines that they came from. And luckily, through my travels, I had encountered some really incredible food experts. So I already kind of had that base, that team, and I reached out to more as I started this project. There's a lot of people on the culinary history side, on the food culture side, who really study the roots of these dishes. And so I've gathered a really incredible team. I mean, I've got the foremost Italian food expert probably in the world, I would say, as our Italy guide. I've got, we just interviewed two, right now we're doing Morocco. That's the journey that we're working on right now. And we have two really incredible women who live in Morocco, one in Casablanca and one in Marrakesh. And they helped to guide me through the foodways because I had a window into Moroccan food through the Jewish side. But I really wanted to what is all of Moroccan food? What is that about? So much from them during this journey. So it's been really fun to not only, be able to explore the flavors, but to really get to know these people and their take on the cuisine. And that's part of the membership as well. Every month we bring on these culinary experts for a webinar like this, where we talk about, what is the culture? What is the food? To really get a sense of what these places are like.
So you use the term journey. Can you give us an example of a journey, just one example of what would a journey look like?
Sure. There's actually two types of journeys in the membership. The first type would be like a region or a country. So like we say Morocco, we did Morocco this month. That was our journey. The other type of journey I do is more like a fusion journey, where I bring together a menu that is seasonal or has a theme based on the time of year, but it's united by but it's got flavors from all over the Mediterranean and Middle East, things that I've been exposed to in my travels, or recipes that might not have fit into another journeys menu but fit really well into this themes menu. And so we trade off month to month on those menus, and they're both really fun, exciting takes on food. But I think we might have a sneak peek of the Morocco journey. So I wanted to give you guys just a taste of what it's like. It's kind of, I can talk about it, but it's more fun to see it. So maybe we could show that.
Wonderful. Yeah, let's watch the Morocco journey.
Morocco is among the oldest places in the world inhabited by humans, and its archaeological sites among the richest. The Moroccan population today is comprised mostly of indigenous Berbers, and there is still a distinctive language, though most people today speak Arabic or French. The earliest written records come from the Phoenicians, who settled here between the 6th to 8th century BC. This area eventually became part of the Carthaginian state. In this time, the olive oil and wine culture of the Eastern Mediterranean was introduced. There were also indigenous kingdoms until the Romans conquered the entire North African coast. With the fall of Rome through the Middle Ages, there were a succession of indigenous kingdoms. Arab peoples and Islam arrived in the 7th century. Morocco is among the few places in the Arab world that was not part of the Ottoman Empire, so its cuisine remains unique. At times, the local Berber kingdoms also ruled Spain, so the two countries are gastronomically and culturally linked. There was also a significant Jewish population with its own cuisine. When you start digging in, there is a lot of interconnectedness between the various countries and cuisines of the Mediterranean. Several different dynasties ruled through the early modern period, and in this time, a distinctive royal court cuisine developed. Elaborate dishes of stewed lamb with raisins, nuts, and spices, and magnificent pies were prepared. This cuisine bore close similarity to medieval cuisine. Morocco became caught up in the European colonial scramble for Africa in the 19th century. The French eventually won that struggle, and there remains a significant veneer of French culinary culture in Morocco. In 1956, Morocco gained independence, and by that time had developed a distinctive culinary culture all its own. The Moroccan diet is largely grain-based, including both bread and couscous. Lamb is the predominant meat farmed and served. Goats are also important, and to a much lesser extent, beef. Pigeon is a common poultry served, though chicken has become increasingly common, especially in spiced and sweetened pies like bistilla. Olive oil is the major cooking fat, though there is also smen, a kind of fermented butter, and argan oil with a deep, rich, nutty flavor. Spices play a major role in the cooking, both local and imported from the East, like cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves, and fenugreek. Moroccan cuisine is known for its complex spice combinations, such as the famous Ras el Hanout, meaning head of the shop or the best available, and may include up to 30 different spices. Fresh herbs are also used in Moroccan cooking, especially cilantro. Preserved lemons add a distinctive flavor to this cuisine. Fish is the most important protein along the Mediterranean coast, especially sardines, but lamb is much more important inland. In addition to wheat products like couscous, bread, and pastries, pulses like fava beans, chickpeas, and lentils are often consumed. Vegetables like carrots, cabbage, and turnips, fennel, cardoons, tomatoes, zucchini, and peppers are common. Olives are eaten as a snack and in salads, but also in many cooked dishes. The Muslims of Morocco are Sunni and so fast during Ramadan and celebrate the Eids, or feasts. Traditionally, Moroccans eat sitting on the floor, taking pinches of food from common platters only with the right hand. Lunch is usually the biggest meal of the day, with dinner lighter, unless for a special occasion. Modern Morocco is a country deeply connected to its historical traditions and cultural heritage, with a focus on the future. To truly experience the culinary culture of this fascinating country, your best bet is to take a tour with a knowledgeable local guide. And of course, here in this course, you'll get a taste of what Moroccan cuisine has to offer, right in your own kitchen.
Wow, I love those videos. First of all, they're really world-class production, and you're so gifted as a voiceover artist, I have to say.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
You wrote the script, and so let's dive deeper into the recipe. So let's say we go on a journey. You just really stimulated all the taste buds. Everybody now is hungry. I'm sure everybody wants to right now. All of our participants. So let's dive deeper into the what kind of recipes. Give us an example that we can expect from a journey.
Yes. So basically, every journey has a menu of recipes, and it's going to be a cross section of this culinary culture that we're exploring. And I really wanted these recipes to be very explanatory, like my website. So you're you're guided through step by step so that you can't make a mistake. You've got a written recipe, but you've also got video to show you exactly how it's made. And in addition to that, I wanted to feature regional music, authentic regional music from these places, so that it really feels fun to watch, and it immerses you more into that food culture. So I think I actually offered harira. It's one of the recipes that we explore in that journey. I offered the recipe video so that we could go ahead and watch that, and you could get a feel kind of for how these recipes look in the membership.
All right, let's watch the harira video. wow, that's incredible.
You know,
That
that's a really delicious recipe too. It's one of my favorites from the journey. It's got such a fascinating history. Muslims eat harira at the end of their fast. It's considered a fast-breaking food, and Moroccan Jews do the same for Yom Kippur. So it's got a really interesting synergy between cultures.
I guess it's being lightly digested. That's probably the reason after you're fasting, it's not recommended to eat something heavy.
Yes, no heavy meat, no grease, no heavy meat. It's not a light dish, I wouldn't say, but it's filling because you're hungry after a fast, but it's not heavy.
Now, what's your position on spices? I'm interested because my experience has been that southern, the Mexicali kitchen spicy is very different than Middle Eastern spicy. I can handle Middle Eastern spicy. I cannot handle Mexican spicy.
Yeah, they're
What's
two very different
what's your
things.
position on that? Do you like it? Do you think it's
I wouldn't say I have a position on it per se. I like both. I mean, I grew up in California, so I was exposed to Mexicali flavors from a very, young age. But what I love about exploring the Mediterranean and Middle East as a whole is that each country has their own unique spicy hot versus spicy zesty. There are different ways of kind of thinking about spicy. And what I've really discovered through my exploration of this region is that not only are the spices, they have different flavor profiles based on where you go and different combinations that are popular, but they also have a cultural, a link in terms of nutrition to these places. So, a spice blend in one part of the Mediterranean might help the people living there because they have more sun than another area. It might help them, create vitamin D. I don't know. I mean, we have a nutritionist on the Mediterranean table who actually meets with us in a webinar like this once a month, and she walks us through the cultural nutritional aspect of the recipes and the spice blends. We actually did a more in-depth webinar this month on spices and herbs and using them in the cooking and how those things can enhance your health, and how culturally speaking, something like turmeric, which we hear a lot about it being healthy because it's anti-inflammatory. So there's, typically when you're cooking with turmeric in a Middle Eastern recipe, you're combining it with a fat like olive oil and black pepper. And that actually has been shown, combining those three elements actually shows that the turmeric becomes more of an anti-inflammatory ingredient when you do that, when you eat it in combination with fat and black pepper. And, that's something that I discovered working with this nutritionist and working through these recipes from this region, that the cultural knowledge that comes along with the recipes, it's sort of innate. It's not necessarily people didn't know, 100 years ago that combining fat and black pepper and turmeric was going to create an anti-inflammatory effect, but they knew how it made them feel. And so a lot of these, authentic recipes from this part of the world have health properties that we're only just now starting to discover through science, but that have really been there all along.
amazing? So this gives a scientific explanation as to my inclination to, feel better with Middle Eastern spicy than California or Mexican.
Mm-hmm.
Now you've been to Israel, obviously. You've done a lot of work here. In fact, my own daughter Sharon was working with you on one of your work trips, and actually she was inspired by you, and she started her own little food blog, which didn't last long, unfortunately. But tell us a little bit about that trip to Israel, and if you can share with us a few anecdotes, because I know you met with some very authentic, people that make food, especially in the periphery, in the northern region, the southern region.
Yeah, that was really, I had the best time with Sharon. Sharon is probably my best food friend in Israel. We've been to the country together. We've cooked with families, with culinary experts, with chefs all over the country. And really my goal in doing that was to get a sense of, Israel is such a tapestry of different influences, culinary influences, due to the diaspora and due to the long Middle Eastern history of this part of the world. There's just such an incredible combination of flavors and recipes in this part of the world. So I did this traveling and cooking, particularly with families, to just get a sense of, what is the real picture of Israeli cuisine. The world's focus is kind of on Israel now as a culinary hotspot. Over the past few years, it's become a very exciting destination to explore for people who are into global cuisine and want new flavors. But I've been spending time there for a long time, since long before it, became trendy. And so it's been really fun to dig in deeper into what is this cuisine and why is it the way it is. So we had a lot of fun. I mean, we cooked, like you said, so many different regions. And I cooked with an Arab family in Jaffa. We cooked in Caesarea. We've been all over.
Now, obviously, we are in the middle of one of the biggest disruptions in recent history of the pandemic. COVID-19 really brought about tremendous devastation, not only to the entire travel industry, but specifically to the restaurant sector, to the food sector. And obviously, more and more people would prefer to cook at home, and this gives rise to websites such as toriavey.com. What is your assessment? What do you think is going to happen? Clearly, we're in the midst of a process, but we can already tell that it's going in a certain direction of customized, homemade. How do you see the industry, so to speak, in the future as a result of this pandemic?
It's really interesting. There are small cultural shifts happening and larger ones. So, I said we had a webinar with our Moroccan experts this past week. And one small cultural shift that they let me know was happening in Morocco, which I never would have thought of, is, typically you sit together with the platter of food in the middle and you eat with your hand. And that has changed since COVID. Families are starting to use typical utensils more, and they're not doing the shared communal platter, which is, that's such a deeply ingrained part of the culture, but it's shifted because of what's happening with COVID. And on the restaurant side, I think that first of all, people who didn't like cooking at home have started doing that out of a sense of wanting to take a little bit more control of the food that goes into their families' bodies. But also, I think that the whole restaurant industry it's changing. In here in Los Angeles, anyway, there's a growth of restaurants that are just created for home delivery, and so they're not restaurants that people are going to come and sit and have a meal. They're going to they're cooking kind of their home cuisine or their cultural cuisine, and it's specifically to be delivered to home, so people can get a taste of home cooking from a different culture delivered to their home in a safe way. So I think that probably will continue to expand. I hope that restaurants don't go away. I don't think they ever truly will. They'll come back. It's a sad time for a lot of people who are working in the restaurant industry. It's been very difficult. And I have a lot of friends who are chefs, and they're waiting for this period to be behind us. So I do hope that, we get back to that soon. But meanwhile, people can cook from their homes. They can get as involved as they can in their own cuisine. And I encourage that because it's fun. It's fun to get your family together and cook a meal. It's very communal. And in fact, that's one of the reasons I love the Mediterranean so much as a region. Here in America, there's really a culture of, sit down and eat to fill yourself as fast as you can and then move on. There's another job to do or another, meeting to have. And in the Mediterranean, it's different. There's really this sense of it's a lifestyle food. It's to sit down and enjoy a meal, and it's about the mind-body connection, and have a glass of wine. Take the time to enjoy flavors and savor them and make it a social thing. Once this whole period is behind us, I'm sure we'll get back to that because it's a beautiful culture and it's something that I miss tremendously.
Yeah, I'm sure. It will make a certain comeback. It's just that it's going to be a bit different, and I think that exactly people like you are going to be extremely important and helpful to, especially to people who cannot interact at the same level as they used to interact before the pandemic for whatever reason, medical reason or social reason. Now we live in the midst of this incredible information revolution that is allowing us for the first time in the history of humankind to record every note and every letter and every image that was ever produced. Of course, this was not the case, especially not when we're talking about the history of food, recipes. This was not the case hundreds of years ago. Still, you were able as a historian to dig into the history of food recipes. And so tell us a little bit about what you learned. How did people record their food culture and passed it along from one generation to another in the old days?
Right. Well, before cookbooks, so cookbooks would be the first form of written recipe storytelling. Apicius is really the very first one that we have record of in Rome. But prior to that, it was really word of mouth handed down through the generations. So it was a cultural sharing of verbal knowledge. And you still see that today. You know, a lot of the recipes that I record on my website and explore are explorations with grandmothers. I love meeting with grandmothers because they share so much wisdom and knowledge in the kitchen, and the recipes that they cook are a reflection of generations before them. And often it's, you know, it's not something that's written down, a teaspoon of this and a cup of that and 6 ounces of this. It's you know, you take a dash of this and you take some of this. And so to learn those recipes, you really have to focus in on like, it's become an art form for me to be able to take what somebody shares with me from that generation and translate it into something that anybody can cook in their home kitchen, translate it into cups and teaspoons. And so, you know, before cookbooks, that's how recipes were handed down and cooked. They were family dishes. And thankfully, many of them have survived to this day in various forms, and we're able to enjoy the fruits of that now. But yeah, it's an interesting, fascinating journey.
Now I'm convinced that you're being flooded with requests during COVID-19. People are writing, asking questions. Share with us a little bit about the common questions people ask you, the things that you're being asked time and again. It's important for us to know, I think.
Sure. Well, well, on the webinar side, I get a lot of requests for cooking demos and things like that, and I don't have a ton of time to do them, unfortunately, because I have a 1-year-old at home. So in addition to doing everything on my website, I've got a little toddler running around here. But you know, on the cooking side of things, I get the question, can I freeze this, all the time? People want to know if they can freeze things. So I actually created a whole guide on my website because I got that question so much, of what foods you can freeze easily and which retain their flavor through freezing. I get that question a lot around Passover because all of the recipes on my website are kosher. So I have a lot of Passover interest in when Passover comes. And so a lot of people, you know, with the Seder, they don't want to cook everything, you know, right before the Seder. Obviously, it's a lot of work. And so people want to know, can I freeze this and then reheat it right before the Seder? And with most things, yes, you can. There's very few things that you can't freeze. There are a few things you need to avoid, though.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I'm glad I asked this question about you know, the fact that people would like to know how to freeze food. It's also a cultural change which did not exist 200-300 years ago. Like my mother's family that lived in Yemen 300 years ago, obviously they didn't even have that option to freeze anything or to even to cool things. I don't know what methodologies they used in those days. But in terms of the Mediterranean diet, what do you find about the Mediterranean diet that makes it healthier than other diets?
Sure. Well, to go back to Yemen and how people, would keep food, just real quickly, fermentation was one of the biggest forms of preservation. And there's a big movement now to go back towards fermentation because people are now discovering that fermentation is actually really good for you. It's really good for your digestion. It's probiotic, natural probiotic. So, sourdough breads, there's been this explosion of people baking sourdough bread during COVID. Well, sourdough bread is actually better for you in some sense than yeast risen bread because it is a fermented bread and it has that natural probiotic quality to it. So it's interesting how these ancient ways of doing things, actually we now learn that they are good for us and good for our bodies. But anyway, to get to your question about the Mediterranean diet, it is such a healthy way of eating. And that's another reason why I wanted to start this project, because I really felt that the focus and the emphasis in North American food culture is really to put, your meat in the middle of the meal and then the starch and then maybe a vegetable on the side. But there's really a focus on meat and starch. And it's not the healthiest way to approach things. The Mediterranean diet is much more focused on legumes, vegetables, integrating a lot of seasonal produce and local produce. And then, using meat as a treat, more a treat. It's not made every meal and it's not made every day even. Really getting most of your protein from legumes, from vegetables, from fish, and, saving red meat as more of a treat. And just really focusing on, what are the local things that are growing in this part of the world at this time? Because if you really focus on the vegetables and the fruits that might be growing at any particular time of the year, you'll find that they have health benefits that serve you through that part of the year. So for example, the easiest explanation is oranges growing during flu season. So we need vitamin C, and we have that naturally growing at a time when cold and flu season is soaring, the winter. We have lots of fresh, beautiful citrus on the grocery shelves. So, this idea that when you eat seasonally, it's also good for you is a big aspect of the Mediterranean diet as well. And I would say this membership is not a diet program per se. It's not there to help people lose weight, but it's certainly, all of the recipes in the membership they are Mediterranean recipes and they do fit into a Mediterranean diet and lifestyle. So if somebody's interested in looking to become more healthy with their eating, they'll find a wealth of information in the membership for that.
Now, how do we make sure that what you're saying, which is extremely important, what you're saying is that when you eat seasonally, when you actually go back to the old methodologies that were used in ancient times, it's healthier and probably cheaper. How do we make sure that that this becomes a mass movement? For example, in the United States, I noticed that you can get certain types of fruits year round. And what I'm getting from you is that it's not necessarily a good thing that you can get a banana year round.
I wouldn't say I wouldn't say it's not a good thing. There's nothing wrong. I mean, my baby eats bananas year round. She loves them. But I think it's the idea that, when you're planning your menu for the week, first think about what is in season and what's local and what's easy to get. One great way to do that is through like a CSA box, the boxes from the local farmers. We have one that comes every week that brings local fruit, and it's all in season because it's all local. So, I get that box and I look inside and I think, okay, so what can I make with this? And I let that be my inspiration for the menu for the week. So, thinking in those terms of, allowing those flavors to inspire what you're cooking is a really interesting way to shift your focus to make it more healthful. But there's nothing wrong with eating bananas year round.
No, what I meant was not the actual fruit. It's just that the economy is paying a price for that ability to produce a certain vegetable or fruit year round. It's costly, and I'm assuming it's not very good for the environment.
Yes.
But my question is how to turn it into something that is accessible and affordable to every person, which is really the big question of our time. How do we turn this wealth of knowledge that you have into something that is accessible to everybody?
I think the first step is really learning about the cuisine, and getting an understanding of what these flavor profiles are, what is good for us. And I don't like to say there are rules, but there are certain little tips that we can remember that will help shape our own family's food culture and make it healthier overall. In fact, that's why I brought a nutritionist into the membership who I love. She's incredible. She's actually working with me on a personal level. She's just a really amazing wealth of knowledge. Her name is Lindsay Willan, and she has just a real deep background in a lot of these things we're talking about. What are the cultural roots of what is healthy for this particular part of the world. And so I think it's becoming familiar just with it in general, getting that knowledge out there. This membership is a great start if somebody wants to learn about it. But also, I really try with the recipes in the membership to make them accessible and not too complex. Because we're all short on time, and particularly with COVID happening, it's not easy to get in the kitchen and to have time to make a nice meal. So we do have some more project type recipes that are more like you can dig in and really enjoy this and make it a project. But most of the recipes are very doable, and I think if we're talking about getting this knowledge out on a more massive scale, that's really important because we're all busy. We all have lives. We all have work. We all have Zooms all day long now because of how the world is. And so, finding that time to really make a meal, share it, and enjoy it, it's a privilege, and it's something that if we do it, the easier it is, the better. We want to try and make it easy and fun.
Well, Tori Avey, you've given us so much of your time and your knowledge and your passion. And I think that this is the right time to turn to the questions from the audience. And first question is, are you planning on covering other parts of the world beyond the Mediterranean and the Middle East?
So yeah, we're really starting with the Mediterranean because there is such a wealth of food culture there. And but yes, we do have long-term plans to get into other parts of the world. But first, our focus is really covering the Mediterranean in depth. And then there are a lot of other places I would love to explore. I'd love to explore African cuisine, Japanese. There are just so many different places that have delicious food. And so for sure, that's on the horizon. But for now, we're really focused more on Mediterranean, Middle Eastern, and those countries bordering the Mediterranean Sea.
And the second question that we received from Canada actually is, how do you overcome the language barrier when you travel? Are you using local people? What's your methodology?
Well, luckily English tends to be pretty prevalent in most countries throughout the Mediterranean. People have a pretty good working knowledge of English and can, know enough. But yes, I always, when I'm in a country and I want to explore the cuisine more, I always bring in a local guide. It's super important to get a real sense of what that food is like. Like Sharon, brought together a whole team in Israel for us, really, of incredible people that I never would have known how to access had it not been for her local knowledge of the culinary scene. So, having somebody who's really in touch with what's going on in a country's, culinary culture is important. And some of the culinary experts that I brought together for the Mediterranean table actually also serve as local culinary guides in their country. So this has been a nice outlet for them because right now there's not a lot of tourism happening. So it's been a great way for them to get back into what they do best in a virtual way and to share that knowledge with our bigger community. So
Evelyn Schechter is asking, does cooking diminish the nutritional value of the ingredients?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I'm not a nutritionist. I do know a little bit about this topic. I know that I've learned that the more you cook something, sometimes the less nutritious it is. So but it really also depends on the food. We talked about turmeric a little bit and how, combining that with a fat and black pepper, you have to cook those together in order to get that nutritious quality coming out of it. So it really depends on the food and the ingredient. trying to keep, I think the most important focus when we're talking about getting the nutrition from the food is really keeping the food in its whole natural state as much as possible. So, the more we get into processing, the more we get into using ingredients that have been through a factory, the less healthful it is. And so really trying to get back to, those vegetables, those fruits, those legumes, those things that we can, when we hold it, we can imagine it where it was growing, and it wasn't that long ago that it was attached to a plant somewhere, really focusing on that. And when it comes to meats and fish, really knowing your origin for those. So making sure that your fish is wild caught and that it's sustainable, knowing whether your chicken was free range and what kind of feed it was eating. Those are all important things for the nutritional end result of what you're seeking in your food. An animal that has been kept, in a cage its whole life is not going to have the same nutritional value than an animal that was allowed to free range and eat a typical natural diet that animal is supposed to eat. And so, really having that insight into where those foods come from, and trying to keep them in their natural state while still making them taste delicious, is probably the most nutritious way to go about things.
All right, we have two more questions before I turn it over to Dina and conclude. The first question comes from Iris. She would like to know, she's very optimistic. Post-COVID, what's your first plan for a physical tour on the ground?
I am actually very optimistic too. I don't think we will be stuck at home for much longer. I think the world will come together and we will get through this as a team. But yes, there are plans in place. The membership is very much a community, and we've all become very friendly with each other. So when you're joining this, you're really joining a group of friendly, fun people who love to explore cuisine and culture. And they're already, we've already had discussions in our group of, when this is all over and we can't travel, let's do a tour, let's go explore these places. And we have experts in all of these countries to help guide us. So it's really kind of a natural next step. So I think as soon as we're able to get back to travel safely, we will definitely be planning some trips to this part of the world.
And last question, beyond toriavey.com, if someone is listening to us right now and he or she would like to read a book about food history, watch a movie about food history, listen to a song about food history, what would you recommend? A seminal piece of popular culture about food history that celebrates it?
Oh, just one? Oh my goodness.
Oh, it could be more than one. It could be more than one.
That's difficult. Okay, well, first of all, I would say try the membership. A lot of food history in there. But beyond that, our chief food historian in the project is named Professor Ken Albala. And he works at the University of the Pacific here in California. And he is one of the foremost food historians in the world. He knows more about food history than anybody I know. And he's our chief food historian in the project. So if you search his name, Ken Albala, you will find a wealth of books and information on food history that is very accurate and fascinating. So I would recommend his work for sure.
Wonderful, wonderful. Again, Tori, I cannot thank you enough. Please send our love to Shuki and of course Eliana. And we hope to see you soon and cook together soon.
I miss you so much.
We send your love from Jerusalem.
Yeah, I miss you all, and I do know I really am optimistic.
We're going to cook together very soon.
Let's all hope together.
Dina, yes. Back to you.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Ido, and thank you, Tori. And yes, indeed, we all want to cook in real life together. But before we go, I'd like to remind you all that Tori has generously offered to donate 50% of any new membership fees to her blog made through this webinar to support scholarships at the Faculty of Agriculture at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. And also a quick reminder for our upcoming webinar next week titled Advancing Women in Leadership, Promoting Gender Equality and Creating Agents for Changes, featuring Professor Mona Houri Kasabri, the Dean of the School of Social Work at the Hebrew University, and Dr. Alvadine Abulesh from the School of Public Health at the University of Toronto, and the founder of the Daughters for Life Foundation. Thank you all for joining our program today, and we wish you a good day. Bye-bye.